Hello, my friends. So they opened a new Whataburger close to where I live here in Arizona, and so I just decided to do as any self-respecting Texas boy would and come pay my respects. Got my medium drink. Yes, this is a medium, not a large. Um, Update on NaNoWriMo. Right, I'm up to 15,000 words on the Still Army. Working on that still. Right on track to finish at least 50,000 words for the month, which is the target word count for NaNoWriMo. It may not be enough to actually finish my novel, but it will be 50,000 words. 50,000 words is 50,000 words. So that's where I am with that. And something that I just finished just recently is I just finished reading Dark Age by Pierce Brown, and I wanted to give a review of that. So I'm a big fan of Pierce Brown. A friend recommended him to me a couple years ago, and it's taken me a while to read all 5 books up to this point, but I have enjoyed them. And actually, these are two. He has 2 trilogies, with one coming right after the other, and there is a break there, but it's pretty direct continuity going from one to the other. And to give you just kind of if you haven't read any of these books, give you just kind of a brief overview of Pierce Brown's world, his universe. It's in the future, centuries in the future. Humanity is in space. We have colonized the planets and the moons throughout the solar system. We have terraformed them to make them like Earth, make them habitable. Earth is not the center of political power. Our moon actually is. That's the center of political power. It's all unified under a single government, but there are fractures in that government. And their society is very, very different from ours, because what has happened is at some point in this process of becoming a spacefaring race, humanity was kind of overrun with people of a certain philosophy. They based their worldview on kind of a reinvention of Greco-Roman society. And their new society, their values are very different from our values today. In many ways, I think you would say they're reactionary. They're not really religious in the way that we would say today, but they have a very strong culture, and they appreciate beauty and art a lot, but they also appreciate strength and valor. It's very much a warrior society. And are in many ways, I think you would call it fascist, in that they do not believe in the equality of humanity. In some ways, they are humanist, but they are not humanist in the sense of being believing in egalitarianism. In fact, they have genetically engineered humanity to create a new set of races based on colors. Like the race that's kind of in charge of everything they're called golds. They are literally gold. Like they have like gold eyes and they have blonde hair, and they're bigger and stronger than you and I, and they're just bred to be warriors and leaders. So you have golds and silvers and coppers. They're kind of at the top, and then you have all these other colors like greens and blues and oranges, and the main character is actually a red, which is close to the bottom of the ladder, of the social ladder. But in the first book, he becomes part of an underground organization trying to overthrow the government, and he actually gets completely physically changed to turn him into a gold, so that he can be a subversive at the highest levels of society. Anyway, in the first trilogy, that's the story of him and his friends basically overthrowing their government and creating a republic, right? But with the next two books, you see that everything doesn't become cheerful after that, and they still have problems. Um, like they only liberated part of the empire, like the part within the asteroid belt. Outside of the asteroid belt, everything is still under the rule of the Golds, and also they're still fighting the remnants of of this empire that they've overthrown, and they also have fractures within their government with people, all the problems of republics and democracies, people trying to vie for power at the expense of everyone else. Lots of problems happening. So I think the main stylistic difference between the first trilogy and the second trilogy is the first trilogy, it's all told from the perspective, it's all first person, but the first trilogy is all told from the perspective of the main character, whereas the second trilogy it bounces around with its perspectives. It's also first person, but it incorporates a lot of different characters. And interesting thing that Brown chose to do in the second trilogy is that, see, at the end of the first trilogy, the heir of the throne that he has overthrown, he's a kid, and the main character Darrow decides to let him live, and then of course in the next trilogy, that kid grows up and becomes one of Darrow's antagonists. And there's a lot of other stuff going on too. Now, to just kind of give you a general feel for the story, and his style, like I feel that Pierce Brown is really a gifted writer. I love his style. He's descriptive and even poetic without going into too much detail about things. I think that a lot of the time when writers want to get really descriptive and write very poetic language, they tend to go a little too far and kind of go on and on and on. Pierce Brown, I feel, does it just enough. He can really turn a phrase very well. I love how he describes things. He gives great visuals, and he does so with as few words as necessary. So in that sense, I really like his writing. The story is very violent. All the books are very violent. There's a lot of violence. There's a lot of brutality. And that's, I think, one of the interesting things that he does is he shows how very brutal and ruthless and amoral humans can be, while at the same time still giving you characters that you like. I know a lot of stories, a lot of writers, they will give you these very brutal stories with a lot of violence, a lot of fighting, and a lot of intrigue and different people fighting for different things, and to the point where you just become very cynical and you hate everyone. And none of the characters are really likable. In Pierce Brown's stories, like he gives you characters who are likable despite all of these things. But again, also, he sometimes has even his likable characters do things that are bad or maybe not smart, but not a whole lot. Happens some. There's really only, throughout the 5 books that I've read, there's really only one thing that Darrow, the main character, has done that I really feel just really bothers me. And that was at the end of the 3rd book, but I'm not going to tell you what that is. But he often gets blamed for bad things that happen that really aren't his fault, and he's generally a very good and likable character. But he does do at least one thing that I just feel is not conscionable at all. But anyway, the 5th book is what I'm talking about, is Dark Age, and this is where you really see rifts in the new republic that they have founded. How you have criminal organizations undermining the government, you have politicians undermining the government, and you also have the the remnants of the previous order fighting against the republic, and And it's an interesting thing because like there were within the previous order, there were the people kind of in the inner system within the asteroid belt, and then there were people outside of the asteroid belt. And the ones within the asteroid belt were the ones who were dominant. Outside the asteroid belt, there were Golds who were in charge of things, but they were kind of secondary to the ones inside the asteroid belt, on the rim and the core. And so the rim was kind of happy that the core was overthrown as long as they were able to maintain their power in the rim. But in this book now, the rim is turning against the Republic as well, fighting alongside what's left of the core. And you're seeing people playing for power among the Golds who are trying to reestablish their power. All things considered, I love his battles. I love Pierce Brown's battles. He does very well in describing his battles. He's very imaginative and inventive in showing what kind of war they would fight. Some aspects of their warfare are similar to our own, what we would be familiar with. Others are very different in a way that I think is actually pretty realistic. From a hard science fiction standpoint, I think some of the things in his books are not exactly realistic, but a lot of them are. I like at one point in one of the books he makes a dig at Star Trek because they're in a starship that's being that's in a battle, is getting shot, and then they're getting hit, but they're on the bridge, and he says how like, oh, but there are no exploding consoles or anything because this is a very well designed ship, which is totally a dig at Star Trek. But anyway, my general review of Dark Age is to say, first, it is a strong continuation of the whole series. I don't feel that it has degraded in quality from the first book to the fifth book. It's still very good, still very much everything that I like about Pierce Brown. There's a certain cynicism of it, and typically I don't like cynicism in stories, excessive cynicism in stories, because I am just at heart I'm an idealistic and hopeful person, but I feel that he has just the right amount of cynicism to make his story compelling and believable without making you hate the story and the characters. So I like that, and I like how in the story it's just like well, one thing maybe that I don't like about it, but then again I do, is that as the story progresses, you bad things keep happening. You know, they've overthrown the tyrants. They're trying to establish this new government, and they're trying to help everyone. But then all these bad things keep happening. People don't trust them. People trust the wrong people. The bad guys who are overthrown are still not dead. You know, and it's just so frustrating to see all these things happening. It's so frustrating. Like, reading it as a reader, I get so frustrated with it, but that frustration keeps me hooked. And he gives just the right amount of frustration to the point that you want to see them get through this. But while it's happening, you're wondering, how could they ever get through this? How could they ever recover from this? How did this happen? What could possibly happen that could help them rise out of this hole? But you keep going as a reader because you want to see how that happens, and you know that even though lots of terrible things happen in the story, and they do, there is still this underlying hope and positivity and optimism. There's a little bit. There's enough of it to make the story enjoyable, even though there's all the cynicism and the realism, and even though you see so many of the worst aspects of human nature in the story, it's still, you know, Pierce Brown still manages to be likable by giving you likable characters and giving you hope. I'm really wondering how this series is going to end. There's going to be one more book in this trilogy that's coming out next year. And I wonder how he wraps this up. I want to know, are they going to fail in the end? I mean, it's a possibility that they might. I don't think that would be good writing. I think that Pierce Brown might do that, but probably not. Are they going to end up having just like an uneasy truce where the rim remains tyrannical under the tyrannical rule of the Golds, but then the core finally overthrows the remainder of the Golds there, and they are able to establish a republic there? Is the whole order of the solar system going to break down to the point where it's just each planet ruling themselves? What's going to happen? I don't know. I honestly don't know what Pierce Brown is going to do, and that's what makes it interesting. That's what makes me want to keep reading. I want to know what happens. So, in a nutshell, character's likable. The story is engaging because he is not afraid of having bad things happen, and so you never really know what's going to happen. It's very fast-paced and fun. The action sequences are amazing. The warfare is great. There's also a great philosophical aspect of it, where you see some people fight who are honorable and fighting for order, but fighting for the old order, and you have other people who are honorable and fighting for the new order, and then you have dishonorable people on both sides. So you see the moral complexity of the whole thing. And yeah, in the end, I definitely recommend this book for people who like intrigue and like science fiction warfare. And if you like fantasy, it's not technically a fantasy novel, but it has many aspects that I think are compelling to fantasy readers. And for people who just like a fast-paced story, it's a great book. Highly recommend it. No, the whole great series. I highly recommend it. If you have read the series and you have any comments to share, please do. If you dislike the series, that's great. I want to know. And I've often thought, if I were an English teacher, when I was in high school, I actually had a classmate who said that she was doing a report on Dr. Zhivago, and she said that she didn't like the book, and our teacher got so upset at her, basically telling her that she was not qualified to have an opinion. I think that's ridiculous. You're allowed to not like a book, but as I would tell my students if I were an English teacher, and as I'm going to tell you, I want to know why you didn't like the book. So yeah, if you've read any of these books and you don't like them, let me know why. I'm actually curious to know. Next one in the series, the final book in the series, is coming out next year. I'm excited for that. And again, I'm continuing with NaNoWriMo. I'm going to have hopefully the first draft of my second novel ready by the end of the month, and my first novel will be published next year in January. That's the plan. And again, my novella, Den of the Wolf Man, is already available for free, so if you haven't gotten that yet, be sure to do it. I'm going to put the link again in the comments below, and I'll talk to you folks later.